I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast episode number 72. This one is with the one and only Aaron James Draplin. For those not in the art and design world, Draplin is probably one of the most well-regarded and biggest graphic designers and curators of commercial art in the world, and has been for some time now. And I was fortunate enough to get to meet him years ago. You hear about that towards the end, and have known him for a pretty long time. He's a great guy, one of the best, salt of the earth. He can be found everywhere at Draplin, draplin.com. Buy his merch, say hey to him, tell him Jody sent you, tell him you heard him on the Ramblin' Man podcast. I'm sure he'll get a kick out of that. No sponsor this week. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and if you really want to help, really want to give back, really want to show support, find Black-owned businesses in your community and support them, but don't just support them now and get a pat on the back. Support them in perpetuity. And if you'd like to give any money, go to blacklivesmatter.com and give money there. Find a local chapter and do what you can, no matter what. Thank you again for listening. Without much further ado, here's the episode. God, what month are we in on this thing? I started walking on Wednesdays and Fridays. I do a mutual distance apart on Fridays and Wednesdays, but it's 95 degrees and I don't know, 80 to 90% humidity out there.
Yeah.
So my walk took a little bit longer today than those hills were a little brutal.
You got that Civil War heat down there. All right, man. Well, what are we doing here?
Okay, I'll run through the rules. There are rules. You can cuss. You can say whatever you want.
I'll keep it cool.
My mom doesn't listen to this. I've kept her away. Don't answer, and I know you enough to know I don't have to worry about this. Don't answer with one word where a paragraph will suffice.
Okay.
If you want me to cut anything out later, just let me know. I'm happy to cut out anything. If you start moaning on about how much you love Creed, I can cut that out. I don't want
the Smash Mouth is in the SMs right down there in the S section right there. Fucking ass. Look, sorry. Okay.
You went to their live show, right? You went and saw it.
This is just one big calling of the dumb. Just let them all go. Just if that's what it is, fine. Let them all go. But
have you ever heard of the Sklar brothers, the comedians?
Of course, yeah.
They've got a daily podcast now, and they're like, it's fine. Richard Branson, just give them an island somewhere and just send them all there. There's no hospitals. There's none of that shit. And I was like, that's accurate. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a conversation. I do have a handful of questions, but we can just talk and interview, no stress, very low stakes.
Do you need me to do anything on my end, or do you do all the recording there?
I do all the recording here. Yeah, so everything is fine. Just maybe speak up.
Speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I know that's going to be hard for you.
Yeah. You've been down this road. Yeah, okay, well, just let me know how I sound and everything if you need to.
You sound great.
Need to talk a little bit, and you can cut that out later on or whatever, but let's go for it.
Yeah, sound great. So with all this going on and you being on the road so much, has this been good or has this been nerve-wracking?
Well, it's been a nice break, honestly.
Yeah.
What a privilege to go as many places that we get to go every year and, do these speaking gigs and workshops and fun things. And it's been quite a pace. So it was a little weird to let that go away. My accountant saying things like, I'm noticing not as much money coming in. It's like, well, right. But
Yeah.
it also means that much less tax that I have to deal with later on. So that's a weird benefit, not having to go out there. First of all, the benefit is just having the time to be here, and spend some time home. My shop has never been cleaner. To go through and really do spring cleaning and dig out stuff, and refine things down. So in a weird little way, it's been really nice to be home and not have that pole constantly messing with me, which, like I said, I don't want to cry about that. Like I had a lot of stuff for April and May. I had Australia in May for 10 or 11 days. I had a whole bunch of stuff for April and then right into the early May. But I can't cry over that because I've had 10 years of going to Knoxville to talk to people for a couple days, and then a couple days later going on to the next thing. And I will never complain about that. So it's been a nice break. But I just sit, and what's happening now is I'm getting the calls to come and do little pep talks and workshops for stuff in the fall, but all virtual,
Okay.
And, of course, it's not quite the same loot, fine, but it's still a little something. And you have to understand what I don't talk about in these things are all the times I go to these, especially in the last 3-4 months, where I've been, going to schools that weren't allowed to graduate because of COVID, and Corona. And I would have a little pep talk and just kind of say, I don't know what I'm going to do either, you guys, but you're young. You're just starting, and let's just think about it with this sort of perspective a little bit differently. But I've done a lot of those. So I guess in the fall, people are going to start digging into their budgets to entertain these little youngsters that have still, stayed on, and sign up, because they're all going to be doing it from home, I guess.
Yeah, that's been the weird thing is I've got some friends that one of their kids goes to some prestigious university. And he was pissed because he was like, they're not knocking down the price. And my kid is still sitting in his PJs in the kitchen. And he was like, that's, yeah.
I mean, there's just a process to iron out all this stuff. I mean, what do you, first of all, who's interviewing you? What do you even do to make a living? I don't even know.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Well, I strip on the weekends. I drive up to Lexington.
It must be hard making a living on $5.
Hey now, this is my podcast. Damn it! No, that actually comes from. I went on a Tinder date with a former stripper. She was like telling me, "Oh, my dating stories are epic, dude." But she would go to Lexington on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and make enough money to pay for 2 different culinary schools and massage therapy school.
Wow.
She was like, there's a lot of horse racing money to be made. Yeah.
He would go north and then, wow, man. Well,
So that's my default. I've been stripping in Lexington.
Yeah. I mean, did anything ever come? Was she a nice gal? And you guys had some nicer.
I'm trying to think how polite I should be. It turns out that it was near her birthday and she was looking for, and I'm going to do this visually. She was looking for 2 guys, and that's not how I roll. So,
call you old-fashioned. Wow, man.
Yeah, I found out that later from another friend who had connected with her, and she was drunk, and he was drunk. And he was like, "Why did you ghost on Jody? He's a nice guy." And she was like, "Oh, I was looking for," and he was like, "Oh, okay, never mind."
Wow, man. The waters that you are navigating. Listen, I'm taking. This girl hit the fucking jackpot with this. She was, found the gold streak and through the valley. She really hit it here.
Oh, man.
But okay. Well, I mean, good luck in that department.
So I'll give you the truncated version of me. I started at my high school. There was a vocational department, and you took pre-voc, and you could do print shop, upholstery, woodworking, electrical, auto mechanics, drafting. There were 2 computers. I love, because I go back and talk at that school, 2 computers in the entire school, and they were Mac Classics. and one of them was in the print shop and one of them was in drafting. I knew I wanted to
High
get
school. What year did you get out of high school?
96.
Ah, so I'm your elder. Okay.
I'm not going to take that bait. I want to take that bait so bad. No. But yeah, but I think we graduated college the same year, which is funny.
Yeah. 2000, something like that. Yeah.
99.
Yeah.
So but I did that all 4 years in high school. I did the print shop because they had a computer and I got to learn every aspect of printing. And we actually had real clients. And I love also telling this to kids. Our biggest client was a pager company called Volcom. So when I see the kids with the Volcom shirts on, I'm like, oh, that's the pager company. It's not the pager company, but we would do real work and earn money for pizza parties. So I had a pass to where I could leave campus at any time that I made myself and laminated myself, and the teacher approved, and could just go and buy reel pads, press wash, all that stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But did my own thing for about a year after college. I went to a technical community college because it was more hands-on with the computer as opposed to the artsy-fartsy stuff. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Worked in publishing, worked in printing, worked for, have you ever heard of PetSafe? PetSafe, the dog collars where you put up.
Actually, sorry. Yes. Okay.
So worked for PetSafe and brand and marketing design for them for 5 years. Worked for a newspaper conglomerate and then got laid off. Got my walking papers. This past Sunday, it was 4 years. 4 years.
Oh.
So I've been doing my own thing for 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Doing marketing or graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation.
I mean, so you can do that from home. So this isn't this jarring thing where you're furloughed or anything weird like that.
No, but the problem is like right at the beginning of this, I'd lined up 3 big jobs, and all of them, like they were all through corporations, and they still don't have their budgets back. One of was an event-based thing that would have happened in July, and it got canceled for this year. And then one of my contracts where I was doing social media work for the local visitors bureau got pulled. So the unemployment thing has been helpful, and now that's gone. But in that time, it's what is it, Mickey from Rocky? Like, you can't stay down. You got to get back up. And so I've been working on ways, instead of relying on clients, stuff that I can do myself. I'm never going to be like you. I'm never going to have this massive supply of stuff. But I've thought about all these little things. Like one of the things I figured out I could do really well is draw houses in Illustrator really quickly. Like, so I went to a historic district where my friends live, drew their house. It took me about 3 hours to just draw it in Illustrator. And I've started producing these little prints, and you can buy they just put it out to the neighborhood group, and they're like, anybody want to print, contact Jody. And there's 400, 500 people on.
That's manifesting a new way. I mean, when people ask me like, well, how do you do this stuff? And how do I tell my kids and how to tell these kids what to do? And it's like, go talk to Jody out in Knoxville, because the idea is you enjoy that.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's something like, sometimes I'm in here working on projects and stuff, and it's an uphill battle because I'm having to really invent things for whatever it is. Okay, fine. That's part of the process. But when it's mindless, where you're just kind of doing the production, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Because you just whiz through it. You have an A and a Z, and you get to Z and you're done. Yeah. So good for you, man. That's really interesting, because that's a skill set you had, and that you're utilizing this fun little way to make something where people, I mean, what do you charge for?
Right now it's for black and white only. So I'm doing it where it's black and white only, and it's 135, 140. One color or 2 color, which I've just done these weird like swaths of color just to add some color. Let them pick something that matches their house. Right. And that's 165 or 195, and I'll send a frame with it. Those magnetic. Yeah.
People want to support the arts, whatever you want to call it. They also want things that they can actually look at.
And that's been a weird thing. Like one of my friends was like, well, you need to charge more than that because if it takes you 3 hours, you're not charged. I was like, but people don't want to spend $600.
It's a trade kind of thing. It's like, hourly rate.
Yeah.
That's get a podcast going, get some records going, and make the money. And you do a couple of those a day. That's amazing. And let's just say you did 5 a week.
Yeah.
A week, and that's another $500 to go towards rent. You invented something there.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. And it's like I said, it's not this thing that you're like having to pull teeth to get through.
No. 19
Zoom calls. No, there's a way in and there's a way out. And that's really impressive because, sometimes some of the stuff I do, it's I've done it a million times over, but it's like we're starting over every single time because people want that experience, to make a logo or something for them. And I understand. I try to, to mitigate it going too weird and spending too much time, but there is something about production.
Yeah.
And just making it like, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at. I go in and I'm done at this time and I'm done, Yeah. Stuff I like, but yeah.
It was funny because I bid on one pretty big job with and this is going to sound a lot worse than I mean it, an oil and gas company. They have like 28 gas stations, but they also run an oil company. And it was like a bigger job to rebrand and re-website and do everything. And I went in there and it's me. So I was just completely honest with them. And they're like, well, what would you change about the store out front? I was like, paint and lighting. And they're like, oh, you don't mean the logo? I was like, no, it looks like you're going to get murdered in there. You need better paint and better lighting.
Just that perspective. That's what they're paying for.
Yeah.
Understand, just to kind of say, listen, this isn't really, your graphics are good enough or whatever. Wow. I mean, listen, all these, this is really interesting to me because I do what I do. I've tried to always manifest weird little ways to make merch and make money and do things like that too. What that means is it's completely within my control. Yes, I can find the people to buy the stuff, but it's within my control to make it, to produce it, to pay for it, to ship it, to get it here, to sell it. There's no one else, pushing me around in that process. Maybe it's the customer, but that's my favorite stuff to do because it is closed circuit. Listen, I get someone that I'm working with that can basically say stop or go. That changes everything and can get really weird really fast. So I just appreciate that because in my own little right, that's what a lot of just trying to do is just try to make it so there's a way in and there's a way out. And we're not toiling away in the what ifs. Yeah. Because I can meet that need, but then sometimes you're just wasting time. And that's where it gets weird,
Yeah, it's been weird. Like the first 2.5 years or so, I had this big client that was I can't wait to see your face on this, a basement waterproofing company website. And they paid the bills. And
there is no race to say, okay, like what would be the coolest thing to say? Let's just say it's
well, something I worked on now, a brewery where I did custom art for a glass.
Let's just it's like some like what's the coolest place in Knoxville? It's some cool place to get your hair cut or a coffee shop or something. Okay, that's the coolest place. This is not a race to someone gets to do that work. Yeah. The race is to get a paycheck. Yep. If you're getting a paycheck, fine. And they're not horrible people. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, if you're working for the Young Republicans Club of Dumbassery, I'm not doing that logo.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that was another one that possibly came up. It was somebody's campaign. And I was like, wait, what side are you on? Yes. And they're like, right. And I was like, going to have a hard time doing that for you, brother. I love you, but I'm out.
I got my hard line in the old, which side of history are you on? Son? Yeah. Well, okay, good for you, man. Good for you. Because, hey, I know, not.
Yeah, there's a comedian. I'm just going to quote comedians this entire time. Comedian named Bert Kreischer. One of my favorite. Yeah. And he told his dad told him when he was young, he was like, eat shit, cash checks. And I was like, you're damn right. I was like, it's fine. You're going to draw, like you say, the perfect little drawing for the beer glass. And you're going to get paid $75 for doing that because they don't have a budget. And then you're going to do work for the basement waterproofing company and they're going to pay your mortgage for a year.
But check it out. Let's just say that $75 that went towards an incredible dinner with the stripper, or it went towards, I don't know, paying a bill for, I mean, it's a little bit of your time. It's just a step in the right direction. Yes. Sometimes it's it's this value where it'll pay your mortgage, like you said, and it's not maybe not the funnest stuff. Yeah, but see, this is, it's not easy to make your own way. It's just not easy, and it's like, I just appreciate that you're willing, instead of belly aching and say, I didn't get the coffee place and I didn't get the coolest thing and the coolest thing in the band and something. No, might be the basic. They need and deserve good graphic design too. That's awesome. So you don't need to apologize that shit to me. I never measure. Listen, I always tell this one story about when I go to the HOW conference or some of these Adobe conferences, these big ones, right? And there's just one kid will show up. And the reason he shows up every one of them is because his company sends him to these things like clockwork. Like, he'll always say, yeah, I'm that guy. And this one year he says, I'm the guy. I said, nice to see you. He goes, yeah, I'm the guy that works for Subway. I know Subway. And I just stopped him and said, listen, man, I've met you a couple times now. You do not need to measure up whatever garbage I'm making. That's all about perception. If this and this and this is whatever, we make our own things. That's just me making my own shit. You could do it too. But that guy who gets a Subway sandwich, he deserves to unwrap that paper and have, you work on the package, a good a good experience with that stuff too. They paid their $7 for the foot long. And by the way, I'll destroy one of those things. It's like, just put it, put yourself in their shoes. They deserve that is as adequate of graphic design as the coolest of the cool. You can't even see it on this podcast. It's so cool up above us. But you know what? When you get up to some of that shit, doesn't mean it's any better. Yeah. You have your heart broken more. I mean, I'll be really, I can't talk about what I'm going to say here about the actual thing I worked for because of an NDA like this thick. But I took this job on. They blow smoke right up the old keister hole. You're this, you're that. You got the job. You got the stuff. You got the thing. What's your price? I give them the price, and then they kind of pare it down, and they say, hey, we're going to put this into thirds, and we'll just kind of say, the first third is this much, and if you get it, we go past that. The second third, the second 2/3, 2 parts of the project, 1/3 and 2/3. When we get to the 2/3, and we'll take that thing on. Well, I got through the first third. And I haven't heard anything back. And these are professional people where it's like, well, I guess I just assumed that I didn't get the second 2/3. That was part of the contract. But at least have the damn business professionalism to call me up and say, you didn't get it. And I'm going to go, oh, shit. Who cares? It was icing on the cake anyway. But see, that was up here in the big leagues. And that sucks because when you come back down to the stuff that's a little more terrestrial where it's just sort of us, it's us and my friends, and the guy who only has the $75. I had a guy who was a psychologist, and his thing is called Propel Consulting. He just wanted like a ship propeller, a little bit of movement. Mm-hmm. I knocked it out in a couple days. I don't know what it was, $700, $750 or something. I just gave him $500 or $750, depending on how far we go. Right. And like that $750, that pays for my road trip in a week here. Yeah. Yeah. It's money I can give my mom. And I knocked it out pretty quick for the guy. I knew what he needed, and he was really a sweet guy to work for. There's an in, there's an out. You make the money. I just learned a long time ago that cool is so subjective. And the people that you covet and go, ooh, they're working on so-and-so. Once you really get into it and see what they're actually doing, you might go back to that basement gig and just be like, I can get this shit done and not have to deal being on phone calls with a bunch of people I would never step foot in a room with. Yeah. At least I know my shit's getting used. Yeah. I got my paycheck and it covered your mortgage. So, that stuff is never a dirty word to me, Yeah. So that's good.
Well, it's wild because like a friend of mine, it's one of those hard things when you're trying to make it, realizing the internet is bullshit. Instagram is bullshit. It's the perfect photo, all that. So I was talking to one buddy of mine I was like, one of the early episodes was on friendship in the internet and how that's changed the dynamic and stuff. Because you're getting to see, this is a group of friends that I'm friends with all of them. They all went out to dinner. And I'm sitting at home eating Crystal, and he and I were talking and he said the best thing, he was like, unfollow. He was like, your heart should not be skipping a beat every time you're scrolling. He's like, just unfollow. It's not worth the stress. And he's like, if there's fallout, who gives a shit? Right. Unfollow. And he 100% right. 100% right.
I met a psychologist who was telling me about how she was working with all these young kids who have these withdrawal problems. And kind of bullying things going on because kids are mean. Kids are mean, and then they're mean to each other, and it's just this weird thing where like someone unfollows someone, and that's your part of your social circle, and it really wrecks these young girls and stuff, and these all sorts of young kids, and how that is that's one of her main jobs that she does. Because when I'm around her, I ask her things like, she can list off all the phobias she's dealt with, help people, with a little bit of treatment or whatever, and a little talk through these things. But I said to her, what about the phobia? Is there a phobia of being in this vast emptiness of space, and the emptiness of like the grand wrestling with the grand insignificance of, yes, you're trying to have a good moral life up and down, and this is that, and we try to help people, but we are just a speck within a speck within a speck within a speck.
Yeah.
And the idea that someone can't deal with how much of nothing is in every direction around us, well, it's called apeirophobia. So when we were talking about that, she said, well, yeah, that sounds like kind of a fun one to deal with. I looked it up, and that's what that is. If someone has a hard time letting the universe and the grand mystery psych them out. But that's where she makes her money. She deals with a lot of kids who are, measuring themselves based on how many clicks and likes and stuff. And listen, I do it too. We all do it. It feels there's a dopamine rush for, wow, I got this many or I got that many.
Yeah.
Like anything, I just try to use it like a tool. It's a tool, and sometimes you just don't even open the toolkit. You just don't even, if you're only living in that stuff, like check it out. My face right now, and it's not savory, but if I do this versus this, I just lost 12 pounds when I go, this or whatever, whatever. Shit, man, let's just, fucking Bert Kreischer's always take your clothes off and shit, gross. Well, you have this ability within that medium to like curate exactly this sort of facsimile of this image of yourself. And until you get next to you, and I'm looking up at you and you're looking it down at me just going, good God, I'm going to throw up, or whatever you said the last time I saw you, that's real life. And if we don't even know how to live in that, I mean, that's what's scary about like all this COVID stuff is like, I don't know what's going to happen, of course, but just do your part, wear the mask, be a good human, do it's kind of goofy. I know no one's taking your rights away. They've had to do in Asia for generations, and they just work it out, and they're doing better than we are. Right. Okay.
So I was curious how long it would take for me to tell you a dad story. Cause I was like, I know you like hearing the dad stories, and I actually got a papaw story for you.
Okay.
That's words of advice that he gave me. But my dad, during all this, mom finally talked him into getting on Facebook like 2 or 3 years ago. And she regrets it ever since, because he just sits there. But he was in one of those groups, and this was like 3 months ago, and he was like, are we still wearing masks? That's all he asked. Yeah. And he got called a Nazi, and somebody threatened to kick his ass. And my sister had to talk him off the ledge. And then I went over there, and I looked at him, I was like, Dad, they're not real people. And I said, pull him up. I was like, did you know Leonard before 4 hours ago? And he was like, no. I was like, who gives a shit what he thinks? I was like, also, he has not seen you. You're 6'4" and a former truck driver. There's no way Leonard is going to step to you.
Last night I was looking at something. It was the wife of Jim Coudal, Heidi Coudal, good liberal spirit, whatever. And just some turd just left some shitty comment. And she just basically handled it in a way where she said, this isn't the crowd to do this to. We don't agree with you. This isn't the crowd. You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But it elicits a response from me of such anger. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, I know we all got to lock down and we got to do our best. But what comes out of this?
Yeah.
Is there an inability to reason with someone who's sitting across the table from you? Is there an inability to read people because we're reading through these filters and these virtual things, and because check it out, if it gets weird, it might be like this for a while. So have to do. I mean, what's interesting, like when I was working on projects sometimes in LA or wherever for that matter, we were doing these things anyway. So it was part and parcel with being far apart. They're not here in Portland. I'm not there in Knoxville, whatever. And weird, but if someone's isn't playing nice in that little sandbox, it affects your dad.
Yeah.
And your dad's extra vulnerable because he's kind of an old-fashioned, probably kind of, I don't know, maybe a no bullshit kind of guy. That's not what he would say on a shitty comment. That's not what he would say sitting across the table from that guy. And yet people do. So, hey, this is the last dying breath, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
But just dumb fucks saying what they want, getting away with it, feeling that their little dopamine rush. Oh, I told him or her I'm going to threaten to beat up this old guy. Like, that's just weird,
Yeah.
Listen, and if anything, just, maybe err on the side of like, yep, we're all still wearing a mask because of this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And maybe the science is screwy and no one knows. But there's also just a part of me that's just like, I just don't trust, really any of these sources. So why wouldn't you just err on the side of just sort of like, just makes sense, cover it up, be cool. If you are sick 7 months ago, one day before this stuff, and you go out, you don't sneeze on people. That's just common sense. You don't drool. If you're sick, you stay away from your family, etc. How's it any different? Well, the way people are morphing, listen, when this Cheeto piece of shit got in, he had the ability to bully his way through and say, up is actually down now. You don't like it, and that's, we're dealing with that. We're dealing with that, this sort of like, the consequences of this piece of shit. Just, you can't criticize all of his just faltering because he'll just denounce you, whatever. And he doesn't make any mistakes. I mean, this is the playbook. So, okay, who gives a fuck about that guy? More the poor dad dealing with this stuff, bringing a different kind of set of ideals to the table of like, no, I say what I mean and I'm civil. And then other people aren't.
And it's weird because dad is very black and white. So it's like, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. There was, here, I'll give you another dad story. So this is going to be a happy, fun one. So it won't be sad. So when I was real little, I was like 4 or 5, when I was like 5'10", let that one sink in for a second.
We're never little. Yeah.
I may have been small, but I was never little.
It's my dad would say, he's like, Aaron, you were never necessarily small.
But see, the difference is my dad always told me, he was like, boy, you'll never be bigger than me. Boy, you'll never be bigger than me. Boy, you may be bigger than me. I can still whoop your ass. And I was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He ended up telling me at age 32, he was like, did you notice the last time we played basketball against one another is when you beat me? I was like, no, damn it, Dad. And I was like 15 when I beat him.
How tall is he?
He's 6'4".
You're what, 6'5", 6'6"?
6'7".
When I lay down, Jody, it just I get about 6'8". You could see with the perspective of this fucking thing.
But I was probably 4 or 5, and him and my uncles would take me bar hopping with them in Myrtle Beach. That's the only place we could afford to go. I grew up pretty poor, and it would be like a group of 20 families, and we would rent out we'd call the hotel and get a discount and all that. So they would take me bar hopping with them when I was 4 or 5 because I was the only kid. And I would sit there and drink my virgin pina coladas, the Shirley Temples, because they came with the little sword.
Sure.
And there was one time I was sitting there and Dad was talking to this random dude. And I remember he had a tattoo right here on his forearm. And that's back when only bikers and Navy guys.
Yeah.
And the guy just kept dropping the N-bomb. And so another little fun fact about me is I grew up on the black side of town here in Knoxville. So I was used to being the minority. I went to a predominantly black high school, never got called cracker or honky. That's my favorite fact about all that. I was like, I never got any hate.
Isn't that interesting,
Yeah. And then so this guy kept dropping the N-bomb, and my dad finally turned around, looked at me, turned around, looked at the guy, and said, if you don't stop saying that word, my son is going to get off that stool, walk over here, kick the shit out of you, and I'm going to allow it. And I was like 4 or 5. And of course, I'm sitting there with my Shirley Temple going, what are we doing, Dad? Like, what are we doing? And the guy just looked at me, looked at my dad, got his beer, and walked the hell away. That's Dad to a T. Like, just black and white. And my grandfather, when I was in high school, somehow this came up at Christmas time. He was like, I didn't teach my boys to say that word. And he was born in like 1918.
Yeah.
He was like, no, you don't say that word because that word is wrong. Like, because he grew up even poorer and pretty rough. So that's a dad story of everything with him is black and white. He's like, well, I don't know why this guy would say something stupid like that.
Imagine if your dad was the guy saying that shit, I mean, because of that broke the chain of that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
My parents are from Detroit, and I heard it growing up, not from my mom and dad, but, around different things, because it was white flight to get it out of the city,
Yeah.
and like, man, I don't know. It was our little generation that just said, no, we're not going to have this stuff, and by the time I got to an age where I was an adult, it was jarring to me to hear it in like NWA or Public Enemy or whatever, reference that was, because I was raised around like, that's not how we talk,
Yeah.
I'll just say this much. When I go home, I'll still hear it, but these are isolated dipshits who are never going to leave out of, whatever little hamlet they live in. They're allowed to do that stuff. It sucks, but they wouldn't last, a minute around some of my buddies, because first of all, they'd have to realize and sort of understand that we're all the same, we're all just people. And, that's really interesting that you said, like, you didn't get any hate. Well, I would like to think that this is the last dying breath of these dumb fucks who think that it's okay to hold on to these old shitty ways, and, I don't know. I mean, I see these videos, these Karens, these people dropping these things. They're dinosaurs, man.
Yeah.
They're the asteroid already hit, They're on their way out, man. I mean, that shit's just not, little babies are being raised to be like, this isn't going to be cool, If they're in some Walmart, it gives me a weird little warm feeling to see, this is good old boy Walmart somewhere. And all the people around them come around and say, you're not going to act like that. You're not going to, they don't even know the phone's on.
Yeah.
That gives me some pretty interesting pause, because it's like, good, man. That's what we need. The scab was ripped off. The scab was ripped off when that Cheeto got in, because he could kind of dance with these white supremacists and all this kind of shit. Get that Stephen Miller in there with these horrible policies. Okay. Hey, man, he's dancing with some ugly stuff, and then playing these word games and semantics around it, and 1 second condoning it, 1 second not. He took a scab off. That scab needs to heal. We need to move past that shit, because, listen, my buddies in the UK or my buddies in Sweden, it's a little different. They weren't raised around that shit. But what's interesting, with this piece of shit coming into office like he did three and a half years too long ago, well, things are getting ugly against Muslims in the UK. Things are getting ugly against people that aren't Nordic descent in Sweden. The scab has been ripped off, and it's going to heal back up, and it'll go back to like, these assholes are going to have to go hide again, So that's 30, 40 years ago when you were that 5-year-old,
Yeah. But I also, you talk about ripping the scab off, but I also think it's because I grew up a little rougher. So my thought is it's also exposing them so we can deal with them and separate them from the herd.
Here's the thing. It's like, at what point it was way out of fashion to act that way first of all, in a public setting, to be talking like that. You were ostracized right away in your community, but no, it's kind of okay now. It's freedom of speech. Hey man, whatever Patriot Prayer or a Proud Boy or whatever stripe it is, or all the way to the other side, Antifa, that's going to go ransack you or whatever the hell. These are fringe.
Yeah.
America doesn't work that way. America lands somewhere in 45 and 55%, 52% and 48%, and we come to some sort of a consensus. No, it's just been, and it's just going to fall out of fashion. To be this dumb fuck who just kind of says, well, this is the way it is because I don't even know any better. And they don't. See, last night when I was talking about that comment, this guy couldn't spell to save his life, couldn't articulate a thought to save his life.
Yeah.
But, still got the sort of vitriol to come and rile everybody up. And all I wanted to say to him is just make a low blow and be like, well, your grasp of the language was standing. Your elegance of grammar, your complete lack of punctuation, whatever, your complete, just make fun of them and say, by the way, you forgot that's supposed to be a semicolon, not a, whatever.
Yeah.
Because, when I was a little boy, if you studied, you learned and you elevated, and you learn these things, and then you use those as tools to maybe enlighten yourself or enlighten, the world around you or whatever, someone else or something. And, isn't it just interesting? The loudest, shittiest voices can't spell.
Yeah.
Whatever. And it's like, I mean, I get it. So, social media and all these little constructs of just sort of like how we take these things on, and that ability to rile up your dad or rile up me or all of us, it's like, you just kind of got to stop and say, maybe this person's pissed. They fucked off in school. They didn't learn. They don't like their job. They don't like their way. They're going to be mad forever. Because frankly, I have run into that. I've run into that. Old buddies and old things. They're divorced. They're pissed. They're that. They didn't get help. They might need to talk to someone, but that's too, they're too macho. And then they're just reeling off in their anger,
Yeah.
Guess who they're voting for? And guess who they're calling me and saying, you really need to listen to Jordan Peterson, Aaron. Man, I mean, people are hurting. People are hurting. They're looking for answers. They're looking for things. They're looking for stuff. I don't know, All right, let's talk about graphic design because, man, I'm going off the deep end.
Let's talk. Hold on. I'll go.
You're the one doing the podcast, and send me, curate me so I don't get in trouble.
Here, I'm going to ask you some music questions.
All right.
So one of the other things I've started doing in this pandemic, a buddy of mine started an online radio station. He got bored because he lost out on work, and he was like, I'm going to start an online radio station. So now I have a weekly radio show called Porch Sitting, where it's all just music you sit around and listen to on the porch.
Ooh.
And it's got an interview portion, so I'll ask you some of those. Okay. Do you remember the first song that made you stand up and take notice?
First song that made me stand up and take notice.
I want to tell you mine because it's sad.
Yeah, tell me.
So when I was like 3 or 4, my parents told me that from the back seat, I started belting out every word to Jesse's Girl. And I was like, they both looked at one another like, where in the hell did he hear that song? And now I'm like, that's embarrassing.
That sounds pretty good. One that comes to mind. See, that's when you're 4, that's a little different. You're just a little, like a little, not quite formed, a little, little thing. You're still Play-Doh at that point. I remember, Do You Think I'm Sexy by Rod Stewart, and being trained to go and say, sing that. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I would say, I remember one that really comes to mind was, what was the Billy Joel song about the Vietnam veterans?
Oh, God, I love that song. Good Night, Saigon.
Good Night, Saigon. Okay. So I would have been about 7 or 8 or 9, and I knew all the words to it.
Wow.
It was a heavy song. And I remember someone down the street kind of challenging my mom and saying, isn't that just a little bit too much for him to be digging into? Because when I was 8 and 9 years old, I used to have a couple little bit of, let's just say, existential struggles even then. Whatever was allowing me at 9 years old to be like, I had a real fear of nuclear war, MX missile. I didn't sit and watch the news. I was 9. But you'd hear these things in passing. And, that's an industry of just, disinformation to scare people. Like I remember the first time I got to Alaska, up in the summer of Alaska, I was on this Captain Cook, in the famous Captain Cook hotel in Anchorage. And I'm going up to the top to meet people for brunch that were like friends of my parents. And on the way up the elevator was this Russian family with a couple kids, and the Russian mom and dad speaking Russian. And I was just like so freaked out because what I was raised on was like Red Dawn. Oh, the Russians are going to come and do bad things. When you actually meet some Russian people and they say, we looked up to America because you had plenty. You guys didn't have McDonald's and shit. It was just like, oh my God. Okay. So going back to all this stuff, I remember my mom defending me and saying, no, he actually learned a lot about Vietnam. He understands that the vets need help. And I was like 8 or 9, whatever. I used to have some problems where I would get pretty freaked out about the concept of eternity. Still do.
Yeah.
Because I'm here, you're listening and, forced catechism, it's Catholic, Sunday school. And wait, you're going to go on forever and ever and ever. And then I'm reading about the universe at school and whatever I'm reading about. And it's like, the same shit I talk about when I go in front of you guys and embarrass myself. But at 9 years old, I had this sort of whatever extra little sense of like, it wasn't just G.I. Joes and Star Wars and shit. You know, I was nervous about things. Well, I mean, I still am. But that Saigon thing, I remember that thing grabbing me because it gave me a compassion for, like, we had a couple people in the family that needed a little bit of help. They had bears, and this was before they called it PTSD and stuff. And it just gave me a compassion for, like, there's a reason why, you know, you're sort of, you know, I guess it would be like a second cousin or something. He's got some problems. He went through some stuff. Or the compassion that I felt for that woman down the street who lost her little brother in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I just knew that you don't make fun of that stuff, or, you know, you have a little respect for the people. By the time I got to of age, 17 or 16 years old, you started to see people going off into the military. And when I was 17 and a half years old, getting out of high school, Desert Storm was going. And they were talking about the draft. And, you know, my mom and dad were the type of like, you won't be going. You're not going.
Yeah.
I knew kids who did. And that song gave me a weird little, you know, armed me with a little bit of compassion and empathy for those kids. Like, you know, when you start to get of age and you realize, wow, where do they do the majority of the recruitments? These kids in these small towns that feel like they're not going anywhere, you know?
A poor school. Yeah. Because I'm the first in my family not to serve. And
Really?
yeah, and I grew up around everybody served, and a lot of the uncles served in some harrowing shit. And one of them, Mom always told me, he's like, oh, when he came back, he would smoke a cigarette down to the end and light the other one off the other one. And then when he danced with you, he'd dance really hard. And it was because he was a smaller guy, and he was the guy that they sent in with a 45 and a flashlight into tunnels and shit. Yeah. So I got to, but what's funny is they didn't tell those stories until I was in high school. But I knew from just being around them of all the stuff. But yeah, it's, I wanted to tell you, there's a movie from 1946. It won like 7 Academy Awards called The Best Years of Our Lives. It deals with PTSD in World War II. And it came out in 1946, the year after it ended. That blows my mind.
I'll take a look.
And there's then something else, the nuclear thing made me think. Do you remember a film called Amazing Grace and Chuck?
No.
It was I would call it an HBO movie. The movies were always on, but it starred Jamie Lee Curtis, William Peterson from CSI, and Alex English, the basketball player. And it was about a 10-year-old Little League player who found out about nuclear arms and decided he was no longer going to play sports until they got rid of them all. And that story got out and went to Alex English, who was playing for the Nuggets. Now it's, you know, a fictional story, but he was a real basketball player. And then he decided he wasn't going to play until nuclear weapons. And it kept branching out from there. So the minute, not to stir up the pot again, but the minute when the thing with Kaepernick happened, I almost want to go, hey, everybody, I need you to go back and watch this movie from like 1986. Yeah. Because this is literally, if you would do it, this is how they did it. And it's in a movie that God knows if it holds up. But I told a buddy of mine, I was like, please go watch that movie. I don't know where you can find it.
This is, when that kid did that, the fucking guts exhibited really was like, I got in trouble at one of my talks. Not trouble, but I said, someone said, you know, what do you think of this? And I knew where the guy was going with it. And I just said, someday there's going to be statues of that guy. You know, there should be. I mean,
I always go back to that when he started, he was seated, and then he talked to a guy who was in the NFL, who was in the military, and that got
when you actually read and like figure out the story. I read the story, but it's just too easy to just, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, Amazing Grace and Chuck. I need to rewatch it because I'm curious if it holds up. But it's so prescient.
To this day, to watch, my mom wouldn't let me. She would not let me watch The Day After in 1984 because she just knew it was going to just rack me and just and really rack me with these sort of like, you know, I couldn't sleep. I was afraid. You know, what do you tell a kid? You know, what do you tell a kid who is afraid of what was our sort of thing? You know, 10 years ago, you know, someone coming to attack and do a terrorist attack or something. Now, what do you tell a kid? You can sneeze on someone or someone, you know, coughs on you, get something, you know. It's like my little nephew is over today. He's 10 years old. it's just sort of like, how do you protect him? He's riding his bike with his little buddies around the block and they're wearing masks, you know? And like, my sister just told him, this is the rule. This is what you have to do. And you don't know where they've been and they don't know where you've been. So you need to go do this. And, they still found a way to go play with each other. They shoot Nerf guns and shit at each other, little animals anyway. And it's awesome, and it's like, we had certain things I remember from when I was a kid that we had to make changes. And this is something we're going to have to make changes on. But, I think back to just sort of like how those things affected me and then how they affect me now. The compassion that I have for someone, when I went and spoke in Slovakia last year. And when you talk to those kids, first of all the selfies they're taking at their homes and stuff, there's walls and things and stuff until they go outside of their homes and you see these apartment complexes they live in. They look like, we're talking, gnarly Cold War era, just gray boxes and stuff. And that is what the state could provide for people, So that's where these kids live because they're cheap and whatever. And there's a look. Now, American stuff, it just doesn't look like that. That stuff just looks really downtrodden because it's really stripped down. And so I was there and it was like my perspective changed when I meet a kid from these Eastern Bloc countries because, they were held down in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If I'm 46 years old, another 46-year-old talks about food shortages in Russia. That's what we talked about. We didn't have that when we were little kids. We had a gas shortage at the end of the 70s. I can barely remember that.
Yeah.
They couldn't even get food. And that's a real thing. Or the idea that, like, I know a guy who grew up on the East German side, and he tells these amazing stories about the night the wall fell. He was 18 years old the night the wall fell. So his life was just starting. And what an exploding point for this guy. Like, he tells this story how he grew up a gay man he couldn't say anything on that side. And that night he got to go over and just feel like himself on the other side. People were giving him money because he had never experienced all this Western bullshit. It's politics, man. These guys they were trying to save face. People were freaking out. And, he was telling me this, what were your fears like? You're on the East side. He's like, our fears that these heathen Westerners were going to come over, give us disease and stuff. He goes, I lived so close to that Berlin Tower. I was afraid that a windstorm was going to knock the tower over onto my apartment complex. He took me to the complex. I mean, you're there and you look it up and that thing is a block away. Yeah. And that's what his perspective was like. Now, listen, I can remember the fall of the wall. I was about 15 years old, right? I can remember the parties and the dancing because one of the things that, when you said about that song, one of the songs that really grabbed me when I was a kid was Sunday Bloody Sunday by U2. Yeah. Because it made me kind of go, and I would have been, 13 or 14, and I read up on the Troubles. And I read up, you'd see these bomb blasts in London on the news or something, and you would hear about the IRA this, the IRA that in the mid-'80s. I went to Belfast and spoke, and I got to tell you, man, you get in the cab with the guy, and the guy is instantly going, so how were you raised? I'm not going to do his Irish accent, but, how were you raised? Because he wants to know, are you on the Catholic side or the Protestant side? And this guy we talked to, he was on the Catholic side. So I explained to him, I said, well, I was raised Catholic, but I don't really tap into that stuff anymore. But he showed us, this is the cab driver. This is the Protestant, and this is 2014, 15. Jeez, here's the Protestant side. Here's we went down this little way. That's a Protestant bar. That's a Catholic bar. You go when there's a Protestant, you get your ass kicked. And they're all just white guys. Soccer jerseys on and shit. You're up in Ireland, right? Fine, man. It was just like I had this perspective of what that song meant in '83 or '82 or whatever. I got to it when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. I remember him saying, "This is not a rebel song." What does that mean? So, the things that sting. And there was a song about, do the Russians love their children too? All about how we had this ability to just blow ourselves up with nukes. I remember being terrified of that song in 1985. I was probably 11 and a half, 12 years old. My cousins gave me the tape, and it talked about, the ability for us to blow each other up. The Russians love their children too, because if they do, they would never allow this shit to go down. When you see the history, the Russians were just making themselves look bigger. and their economics were rough. They were in food lines and shit. You know,
it's like what's going on with North Korea right now, where it's all artifice. It's
all of it. You know, when you see these guys pull back, you know, Vice going in there and stuff and doing these like exposés where they're like actually just going in and being tourists. Oh man, I mean, you just feel so bad for those people, but you know, I don't know. You know, America is just such a stubborn thing. You know, this coronavirus, it's so weird to me. It's like, what changes are going to come out of this? Well, I think we're just going to have to work a little bit better together. We're going to have to sit down with people that we don't necessarily agree with. And I think that's all good, healthy stuff. And we're going to have to come to consensuses. It's just not going to be perfectly Joe Biden or perfectly, you know, whoever. No, there used to be, you know, these sort of centrists and stuff that kind of worked on both sides. But, you know, with social media, with the time, with the fear of getting this disease, everything just goes, you know, it's so, I mean, what's interesting is once you finally talk to someone, even the MAGA people or whatever, you realize, are you just hurting? Because you're broke. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. You know, whatever. I mean, I always
think about, you know, here I grew up on the black side town, so I was used to that. But the thought of like gay people was still, of course, because, you know, growing up, I grew up around sports, so it's all, you know, dropping the F word, FA word. Yeah. And then when I can still remember the day it happened. I was sitting in college in a class, and these two idiots from the other side were like, fucking, and just started dropping the word. And I literally went, wait, is that how I sound? Oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. That sounds stupid. Yeah. And it was kind of the same thing with my dad. It took a little bit longer to where I remember him telling me about watching a movie and two guys kissed, and he was like, oh, that just kind of it unnerved me. And then my sister's best friend was a large gay man, almost as big as me, and he's like, oh, Joe, that's my buddy, he comes over and we split a pizza together. And it was like, that's all it's, knowing one person is literally all it took. If you ever met a gay person, you would never hate gay people.
The thing, it's like, how many more times do people have to like have that epiphany? It's like, luckily we were just, you know, just had enough experiences to be like not raised in this sort of like no culture. It was like, listen, people are people. If that's what makes that person comfortable. I watched my dad transition from, you know, from like, I don't know about that, to like, this is how these kids are born.
Yeah.
You have to have compassion for that. I watched that change in him. He was a little stubborn. He's from a different time. He was born in 1943, but you know, he got hip with it, you know, and that's just all it takes. And I think, you know, the generation that we were in, you know, coming out of, I don't know, you know, Nirvana and stuff. We'll just say, you know, alternative culture, all that stuff was accepted and championed and, you know, barricaded against. This is our friend. We're going to allow her to be this or allow him to be that, and we're going to stand up for them.
Yeah.
I got into that through skateboarding and punk rock and, you know, like bands like Fugazi. Fugazi told me, you know, this isn't the way that you treat women. I mean, the lyrics were about that, how they were learning, how they were, you know, handling things. And it's like, you know, I got my education from some of that too, you know, versus, you know, some dipshit, you know, not even, my uncles were all cool. We'll just say someone that was older and meaner. I was around some of that stuff. And I'll tell you what, to this day, they still are.
Yeah.
You know, and that's their burden they got to carry. You know?
I'll give you two on this one. I'll brag on my city for a minute. Knoxville, number 3 in the country, biggest pride parade in East Tennessee. And I've marched in it 3 times now.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know.
And my dad, at the last one, my dad was there and he walked out and shook my hand. And I will go, everyone here doesn't understand what a big win this is. Like he was proud of me for walking in it.
It's the way this stuff changes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, whatever, you know, I mean, if you've ever been to Provincetown, all the way on the little tippy of Cape Cod, man, those guys know how to party. And I got to tell you, the bathrooms are clean as a whistle when you go there. Sandwich. I remember I went to that bathroom, went to someplace and had a sandwich, and I went into the bathroom. And it was like the first day the place opened. It was like, this is just the difference. You know,
You're like, I'm afraid to pee in here. I don't want to sully.
I'm telling you, these guys just have their shit together. They were so nice to us. The food was great. There's music playing when you're walking through town. You know, I mean, luckily I had the sort of, you know, the lack of filter to not be afraid of that stuff, you know, and, you know, whatever, and learn from it, you know, and we have it, you know, we have people in our family. It's okay. It's okay. You know, we've seen clashes, we've seen stuff, but, you know, things change, you know, and there's I was listening the other day, this, you know, some heavy Joe Rogan stuff where this one was talking about, you know, I won't get into it here, but about gender reassignment and stuff and how kids can make a decision. And it was just like, oh my God, well, we have to iron these things out, because as we get enlightened and as we figure out that someone's trapped inside something else, you know, I mean, what's the elevator pitch from that? It's like, you can't let a little kid make that decision. He's 9, you know, or something, but we're working these things out. At least the conversation we had, you know, instead of just saying no or litigating against that, those days are on their way out. Yeah. This was the last dying breath of just dumb. Yeah. You know, I like to think the last dying breath. It didn't work. And look, and not to mention, we're getting sick because of it. You know, it's not a fiscal thing or some kind of financial thing. It's like, it didn't work because people are just going to go out and say, you know, my liberties are at stake and I'm not going to do this. Well, then let this be the great calling of the dumb. You know?
So I listened to that podcast you're on, the music one that just came out. The 2 guys from England. And you said something on there and I started giggling to myself. You were telling the story about the idiot drunk people almost trying to hurt you. And I thought about it, I was like, oh man, he and I are exact opposites. Cause I would just turn around and be like, okay, cool. We're going to go now. Cause so the runt in my dad's family was 6'1". Like wait,
you mean you would have took the guy on?
Oh, I would have taken the guy on. Yeah.
I know, but you also were like,
yeah, I know. But it's the difference in, I think I was raised a little rougher. I was raised around those guys to where I've put myself in a lot of situations. Like, so going to shows, I have grabbed a guy, picked him up because I didn't like how he's talking to his woman, and put him into a wall and said, we're not going to do and what's funny is I was talking to somebody about this. They were like, yeah, but you haven't done this in forever. And I was like, no. I did this 2 years ago. I walked out of a bar. 2 people a guy and a girl were arguing in a parking lot, and I was on a date, and we started kind of veering over there because we could see him getting into it. And we saw him push her in the chest and her and then her sock him in the chin a couple of times. And I just ran over. I reached up and over the dude, and the dude was not a small guy, and I lifted him up off the ground and turned him around. And the minute his feet came off the ground, he went, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And the girl kept coming back and screaming at me and putting her finger in my face. So I just started squeezing the guy a little tighter. I was like, dude, you better tell her to stop. You better. And he was like, honey, please stop. Honey, please stop. This guy's a big dude. And I was like, no, we're going to stop this right now. This is the dumbest. You all are adults. This is the dumbest thing in the world. So I'm going to play the big guy card and say, I'm stepping in here and we're going to put an end to this right fucking now.
You know, I've watched, you know, in that moment where I was afraid for my life with these boys playing this role and trying to, you know, they're just young kids looking for a rise. We weren't raised around that stuff. We just weren't raised. So the neighborhood I grew up in was, I don't know, what, lower middle class. I don't even know what it was. People weren't dragging each other out of houses. I remember right out of high school, we camped and would mountain bike a lot. That was with a different set of people. And my other guys, they all had families, you know, the snowboarder buddies and skateboarder buddies. But this group, these were mountain bike buddies. It was just a little bit different. Yeah. One of the guys was raised, you know, in a trailer home. His dad had a little bit of a rougher go, and he was a good guy, but he was raised in a little bit of a rough situation. And we went over there one night, let's just say 8:00 at night, and we go over to grab his stuff, you know, because we're going to go grab some camping gear and his bike or whatever. We got out of work, we grabbed him, we go out there, and then we're going to go out and camp and get up in the morning and mountain bike all afternoon. Okay, all morning. But we go over there. And we're in the trailer park. And I remember, you know, I'm looking up at the stars, this beautiful dark, you know, it's dark in this trailer park, but across the way is one little light on, and there's a little bit of a fracas going on. Someone's drunk, screaming, you know, slamming doors and stuff. And what I did was in the dark, kind of slithered over because they could not see past that one wall. You know, I'm on this little road and I'm watching from, let's say, 30 feet away. And one guy gets punched in the face, knocked down off of this little, you know, deck. The other guy jumps on, the woman's screaming, kids are screaming. And I watch this guy get beat up really, really bad. Kicked in the face, hurt, punched. And then he kind of crawls, you know, into the darkness and hides in like a little bit of a divot by the road, you know, where the little water well.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're in this dark and this guy, where'd he go? And we kind of go up to the guy, you know, we've got, you know, you don't have your iPhone with your light on, but you're kind of like in the dark of the night, like, are you all right? We're calling for help. And that kind of like, it just, you know, I remember it as clear as day because it was traumatic. It's like seeing an accident. Turns out this is the shit that happened all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And they were, you know, one night, one guy gets the best of himself, too much drinking, you know, and it was just like, oh my God, like I didn't know what to do other than like just try to get this guy help. He was bleeding. He was cut. Probably wasn't all that bad, but I certainly wasn't raised around that shit. But there's something in me. If I'm out on the road, how about this? I was at a Home Depot. And I'm at the Home Depot, this is 10 years ago. But we'll just say there's a guy in front of me. He's yelling at the little young lady, you know, who's ringing him out. Something happened. He can't get his money back. He wants his money back, and he's going nuts. And then we'll say there's someone in between me and him. So I'm the third one in line. He's the first one in line. There's someone in between me and him, and I'm in the third one in line. And no one will say anything. And she's scared, and she's calling managers, and people are coming up. And I finally just snapped and went, hey, enough out of you. Something like that. And he was this kind of Wilford Brimley old dude. This would have been about 7, 8, 9 years ago. And he said, I said, I'm not going to do anything, but you're going to stop this. You're scaring people. You know, I've done this a number of times. Something snaps in me. Yeah. Now, Lee has seen me do it a couple of times where she'll kind of go, oh, shit. And she'll say to me things like, what if that guy comes and wants to kick your ass? And I said, well, I got into it, but at least I deflected him from her. Yeah. You know, first of all, that guy couldn't defend himself. Yeah. From whatever, much less tyranny or COVID or whatever. But, you know, all this, you know, you see this stuff, just the hot air, the hot air quality. There's been a number of times where I really surprised myself. I don't think I would ever act on it and want to fight, but someone's getting pushed around, and I've used my weight and my size and my bit.
Your voice.
Like, enough, man. You're not, I've done it on planes. Oh man, I've done it. I have a really vivid one from a plane ride. I mean, should I tell you this? You know, like, well, I mean, this would have been about a year and a half ago.
I got to write something down though, because I got a funny Mark Kozelik story for you.
I got to hear that. But I'm on the plane, and I got bumped up to the big seats. So I'm up in the first class with all the, you know, the Steves and shit. You know, they're looking down on me. They got their glasses on their nose, like, what do you do? You know, I got my laptop open. I'm working on colorful graphics and things. And, well, Steve, I'm in the graphic arts and all that, you know, rigmarole. But they're vetting me. Like, why are you up here? You know, well, no, I got the upgrade. So I'm in my seat. We're in the big seats. And the next, you know, right past the little line where they have the little curtain and stuff is the start of the regular seats or whatever you want to call it. Maybe even the extra, you know, I know
business class.
But not even, we're in business class. And then it goes to the next one, which is just a little bit extra room, Delta flight. So a guy sits on the end, and then last second, which always happens. I mean, I was traveling a lot these last bunch of years. Someone sometimes will come on because it'll be one of the Delta employees, and they're just catching a leg up to the next thing, and they put them in these nice seats because they're employees. Who knows what? I've switched out with those guys because I got an upgrade, and they said, well, we put him in first class, and he's going to go back to your seat because they're just catching this extra thing. Okay, so I kind of, you know, you see people coming on at the very, very last second. This guy comes on last second. He's got his little bag and his little stuff. He's a Delta employee. He's dressed in all the stuff. Puts his bag up on the thing, but he's going so fast, the bag kind of goes up on the edge and kind of slips down, and the bag kind of comes down and just grazes this guy's shoulder enough to hit his shoulder. He's an older guy, about 60 years old. The guy, you know. Well, what happens is the guy says, I'm so sorry, I'm going too fast, puts his bag up there, slithers in. Now he is on the inside seat up against the window, this guy. There's someone in between him and let's say the guy. So he gets into the inside seat, and this old guy's going off. How dare you hit me in the shoulder? You're going too fast. Now he's creating a scene. And this guy can't go anywhere. He's up against the window. Sir, I'm sorry. I said, I was sorry. We're going to take off. He does this for a living. He knows how to kind of handle this guy.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's pissed, and he's going off. I want to see your badge. I want you. You're going to be fired. Okay. So he's yelling. Now I put my headphones on, and it's one of these like short little jaunts. It's maybe like something like a Chicago to Minneapolis. So it was one of those little ones, right? Yeah. So it was like maybe 40 minutes or something, and to get me to the next big hub. Or maybe it was something like a Knoxville over to Atlanta. It was one of those little ones. Okay? So you got to go up in the air. You're on the big plane. You go up in the big air, okay. You got to everybody get up. So what I notice is halfway through this little 40-minute flight or something, he's still yelling at this guy. And what I notice is like, the people are afraid of him, but he's kind of handling it. And my headphones are on, noise canceling. I can't hear shit. When we land, this guy starts up again, and he starts going nuts. And he's just, you wouldn't going nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around me. Now people are starting to get off the plane. They're waiting. There's one little backup where someone's got to get a wheelchair or something, so we all have to wait, but we're all up on our haunches, just kind of waiting on the edges of the seats. We're looking back at this guy, yelling at this guy. No one will say anything, and I finally just snap. And I just did my, hey, you're scaring people enough. If you screwed up, they'll figure that out, and you'll get something with your ticket, but enough out of you. And I don't know where it came from. It scared me. And he just kind of looked at me like, well, how dare you? And do you see, he's looking for an advocate. Did you see what I said? It doesn't matter. It was an accident. Enough. Quiet. So we get off. And then, he's the next one in line. He's right up against the edge. They get off. And I'm walking with my bag. I'm a little shook up. I remember just saying to all these guys, come on, Steves. Say something to this guy. We're all up here. We're all adults. You don't say anything. You're just grabbing your laptop and getting the hell out of here. Your business suit. Even the people working. And I'm all shook up. And as I'm walking out, I hear this, hey. And I turn around, and here comes this guy up to me, frenzied. He's got his phone. He's got his stuff. And he's got his bag. Now, he doesn't have his bag on his shoulder. He's got his bag on his arm. That's what I remember. It's like it's all hanging because he just had to get off there fast.
Yeah.
And he wants to tell me where he was wrong. And he comes up to me, he goes, but didn't you see? And he's yelling, and I just look at him, and I saw on his phone, Fox News.
Oh, geez.
And I just went, and this is shitty, but I went, you again. You shame yourself on there, and I'm backing up, and just as I'm backing up, the Delta Sky Club doors catch the little sensor catches, so it opens the door. So I'm backing up, and I'm just backing up, and I go, and you fucking Trump supporter. We got a Trump supporter here. And everyone just kind of goes, boo. And I go into the Delta Club with all the other Steves, Anyway, true story.
That's amazing. That's all you take. It's the voice, man. It's the voice and the finger. The hey.
I know. I could have got beat up.
No, you couldn't. No. Kozolek's story. So I'm over in Asheville seeing him play. And it's at this smaller venue to where there's no real stage. It's just flat. And the only way you could get out was to go to the middle aisle and go all the way to the back. And I had to use the bathroom. And I went and used the bathroom. I walked back in. I'm standing in the back next to some random dude. And Kozolek is standing in front of some kid. And he's going off on him about looking like a lumberjack. He was just kidding, but it was funny. It was fun. He's like, what is it with people in this town with their beards? And they're
very beardy town, sure.
And the what's it called? Not checkerboard. Flannel. And he's like, what is it with the people in this town? These damn beards and he keeps going on and on with the kid. And I look at the guy next to me. I was like, what's going on? The guy goes, oh, he's making fun of beards. I was like, you think I should go down there? He's like, hell yeah, you should. So I walk up, and as I'm walking up, he literally is yelling at the guy, and he goes, yeah, and the beards and wait, who are you? I need to hire you. I need security for the rest of the tour. And then I'm going to have to grab this real quick. So I don't know if I've shown you this before. Nope, that's a business card. I have these cards that say, yes, I am.
Yep,
okay, you do have one. So I pulled out, I the minute he said that, I turned around and started walking back to him, and he started backing up. And I was like, no, 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 no. And I reached for my wallet for the card, and he was just like, dude, I already got your money. I don't need your money. I was like, not that. I handed him the card. He talked about it for 10 minutes. He came back to it 2 other times in the show. And then he was like, I'm writing a spoken word piece about this in Philly the next day. He's like, but seriously, if you want to work as security, I will hire you. I was like, no, I'm good. No, I'm good.
You know what? I've never met him. I've seen the Red House the Red House Painters back in the day, 96. Yeah. I probably said it was a little boring. It was still, I love that stuff, but maybe not the greatest dynamic show to go to. But anyway, saw that. And then I saw him a couple times as Mark Kozlik, whatever it was, all those stuff. And it was beautiful. And, he had the banter. What's up with Portland? He's just got to always have a dig or something. And of course, I know the shit that went down a couple years ago. I read about it, and I'm always surprised. But sadly enough, I've just heard about some of his business stuff that just really turned me on.
Oh, man.
Here, because I love that music. I cannot do any of that spoken word stuff. But that would be pretty fun if you showed up in one of those songs, because he'll just sing about anything. He'll sing about your fan back there that's going. He'll sing about your whiteboard, and then I wrote with the red marker.
Now,
wrote with the green marker. Then I used the blue, whatever. I'm a fan of that guy's stuff. It's just weird to, why couldn't you have a story where it's like you came up and he was like having a great conversation with that kid, whatever. Even though he's being kind of cute and funny or whatever. Yeah. I've just heard a lot more stories in the last bunch of years of people saying, well, the guy's kind of a dick. And every time I hear that, it's like, damn it, I love those records too much, Yeah. I don't want to hear that. I want to just enjoy the records,
I will say I've had one other great experience with that card, and that David Sedaris. It was after a show, and you could go up and sign, and it was very much like you can't shake his hand, you can't hug him, no photos. And I was like, I don't know if you'll find this funny. I was like, but I have this card. And he looked at it, same thing. He talked about for 15 minutes the microaggressions against the tall. And I was telling my friends, like, I'm becoming a David Sedaris story right now. This is insane. And the other one was the band Guster. I've had this happen a lot, but I was like 10 or 12 rows back, and the lead singer jumped off the stage and just started like sauntering up to me. And then he just reached in and hugged me. And so I just started dancing with him. And then he was singing with the microphone right here, and he got back up on stage, and they ended the song. And he was like, guys, have you ever been just held onto by a giant man with a beard? And they're like, no. He's like, you got to do it sometime or something like that. Then he started playing the next song. They got like 4 chords in, and they all stopped, and they're like, hey, man, that was the song we just played. And he was like, I'm still thinking about that big dude. And he made up a song about me on the spot that they all just, I was like, those are the times I was like, you know what? Kozlik could be a douche, whatever. The Guster, Sedera, and I've got to do that with a few people where Christopher Titus, the comedian, every time he comes down, he's like, all right, dude, we're going to do a funny photo. I was like, okay, next time Christopher Titus.
I don't know who that is.
Oh man, he had a show in the 90s called Titus, and he's really funny. He did he does almost like one man shows more than comedy specials. And he did one after 9/11, and he talked about his baby was like 8 days old, and I'm gonna ruin the joke, but he was holding his baby, and he was like, and that's a plane, and it's flying in the, oh God. And he was like, and that day I tried to put that baby back into my wife's womb. But yeah, that's been part of the good things. It's a weird thing of like, you were talking about like stepping up to those guys. When I can still remember this, when I was 6 or 7, I was playing with a black friend on the black side of town. A cop rolled up, started calling him the N-word, and I ran up to the cop and started kicking him in the shin. Like, that's something that happened to me when I was young. First day of high school, buddy I grew up with, I got to see a gun pulled on him for a drug deal going back. And I've had a gun within 6 inches of my face on 3 separate occasions.
Jesus.
Yeah. I grew up pretty, my family, but I am very fortunate because my family is like strong. So they were all, all around them. And it was wild because like my grandfather was super scary. I promised you a papaw story. So there was one point right in the middle of college where I was having a rough time, and I went up there, and he didn't really talk, and he always scared me. And I sat down there and I was complaining about something, and he was like, "Are you happy?" He's like, "No." And he's like, "You'll figure it out. Life's too short to be unhappy." And they just got up and went down the basement. And I think about that all the time. Life is too short to be unhappy. So even through these tough times, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Papaw. You just got to tap into some papaw here and there.
Yeah. Seriously.
Is he still around?
No. Oh, the sad part about that is he told me that, and then a month later he had like his third massive heart attack and died. So, and I've also lost, my uncle passed away at like 52. And that when that shit happens, it's just like, you know what? I'm going to die one day, and I want to have less regrets than I have regrets.
I mean, this whole thing gets me thinking about, I'm 46, I'm coming up on 47, and it's like, man, what does that even mean? Like 47, am I halfway? Am I, halfway? Like I would have lived in 7 shit. I might not even make it through the next morning. And my dad used to say, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. You never know, But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I have to boil it down, I'm like, damn, if I've got 20 good years left, I better make good use of that. Is that graphic design? I don't know. I've made enough. I've done all right. I mean, how much do I even need to live? I tried to save it all,
Yeah.
You start whittling that shit down, to start living and I'll still work and stuff, but as I get older, I don't know if I want to be doing this sort of pace. I can't do this pace when I'm 55 years old. I want to be out,
And here I'm going to give you great fodder to make fun of me. So I smoke cigars, but it has been very beneficial because I'm not the douchey, like, look at me. It's all about community, and it's about relaxing because it makes you sit down and that's all you focus on for like 2 hours. And so there's one buddy of mine that I actually got him to start working for himself. He's a photographer. He's a tremendous photographer. And he saw me doing it. And after about a year, he was like, I'm thinking about going on my own. It's like, you should go on your own. I was like, you're tremendous. You'll make it work. And I will sit at his house on a Tuesday night, and it'll be 2 a.m. and I was over there and I came up with I was like, all right, we got about 45 minutes left on this cigar. Here's a topic for us to talk about. And he got excited almost to the point of doing like skipper fingers. And I was like, I'm never going to regret this shit. I'm not going to regret getting a lack of sleep.
Time that have to sit and focus like that. It's a weird thing. I mean, I get so wound up back here, working on 19 things and loving all of it, too.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a privilege to just enjoy this stuff, like who even says you're allowed to do that? I mean, it's and then I'll just get myself so wound up to where it's like, damn, I need to step back for just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just going too crazy, but it's like I have to stop myself and go back to my list and my field notes and be like, oh, that's what I have to do. Like if I just stand up and I just walk from here to the front door of the place, I'll be sort of, triggered by 6 or 7 different things of like, oh, there's a pile of something that needs to be dealt with there. And, it's like, it's just a weird thing. It's like to just have some time to focus, like this last couple months, to have time to spend an afternoon cleaning the shop, refining things down, figuring out better ways to put stuff away that actually makes it easier for us later on. It's embarrassing to me that I didn't have as much of that time before,
Yeah.
It's like this. So there's been some weird, I'll say it again, and I know I'll get some eyebrows raised, but there's been some good that's come out of this, at least for me, selfishly, like an ability to just slow my ass down and figure out what's right. We're going to see my mom, and I can't wait. I miss my mom. I didn't get to see her all summer long or in the spring. And, we're pretty tight, but we've done what we were supposed to do. So we're going to go back there. I'm going to wait it out a couple days and make sure that we didn't feel anything weird on the way home. But, I'm going to go see my mom, and it's like, I'm going to make really good use of that time. I'm taking a bunch of projects with me. And I've learned that in this last 6 months of like, wow, turns out you don't have to work from 10 till midnight every night. Now, I know I tout that on these talks and things and stuff sometimes. but I just try to make good use of my time. Like I've just had so much extra time, just make bad use of it. And it's been really, really refreshing. Because I just don't know how to do that.
I was talking to somebody, and I was probably about a year and a half into working for myself. And I was talking to somebody who I thought I was friendly with, but apparently I was not friendly enough. And because she didn't know that I was working for myself. And I was like, oh yeah, I work for myself. She's like, oh, when did you start that? I was like a year and a half ago. And she was like, oh, isn't it the best? And I looked at her and went, sometimes.
Yeah.
And she was just like, and walked away from me. And I will go, you don't get it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I can't see going back because, so when I turned 40, I did a 40 before 40 list, 40 things to accomplish before 40. And I think I got, what is it, like 28 or 32 of the 40. And one of my friends fussed at me and she was like, you put stuff on there that you don't know that you would have done. I was like, what's the point of swinging the bat if you're not going to try and get a home run? Like, that's dumb. Like, I would rather have a few things I didn't make because they were too big. Like, it was like traveling to Europe. I was like, no, I'm too busy working. I can't. But no, I've only been, okay, I'll come back to your Detroit. I got a Detroit story for you, but one of the things on there is a museum in Whitwell, Tennessee, the small town 45 minutes west of Chattanooga. This is a great documentary to watch. I'm just giving you homework this whole time.
Right.
Called Paper Clips. And it's a middle school teacher is trying to get their students to understand the Holocaust. Yep. So she makes, so you've heard of this.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
So because I work for myself, I was able to take a random Tuesday or Wednesday and drive down there and see it because it was on the list. I was like, I want to do this before I turn 40. And I drove down there and saw it. And it's small, and it didn't really hit me while I was there. There were other people, and it's so small. And then I get in the car to leave, and I make it to the light, and I'm choking back tears. Like, it's just hitting me. And I was telling a friend the other day, I was like, that's the great part of working for myself, that I can take that drive and just go, I'm going to go see this, and this is going to affect me more than sitting in an office breathing recircled air.
It might mean that you have to get home and put a shift in.
Yeah.
To be able to make that decision for yourself. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, I couldn't really make that decision. I would have to go into these days. I mean, I've worked one official job, like pretty much two official jobs, like as a designer, And one was like, I was a senior designer, and like, you have to be there at 10 o'clock, in the morning. And you're there till 5 or 6 or whatever it was going to be, 9 until 5 or whatever it was. But man, we fucked off a lot. We played a lot of ping pong and big lunches and stuff. And it was like, just started to become wasteful. It was like, turns out I could get my work done from 3 to 5 and then get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Like, why are we coming in so early? Well, when I got that wherewithal to go on my own, it allowed me to work more.
Yeah.
It allowed me to make better use of my time and then have really potent uses of my downtime, and have it all to myself. So I applaud you, man. I know it's not easy. I'm never going back. I mean, but as part of that fear that it was going to go bad, I just worked a ton to save everything. In my 30s, basically. And
it's
pretty busy the last 5 years too.
So I've only been outside of this country one time, and I drove from Detroit to Windsor, and then my cell phone didn't work, so I couldn't figure out how to get back. So I got Tim Hortons, got a coffee and some donuts, and then just drove right back across the border. And I had the funniest thing when I was driving in, the border guard looked at me and she was like, Tennessee, huh? I was like, yeah. She was like, do you have any guns in this car? Or do you own a gun? I was like, no. And she was like, are there any guns in this car? I was like, no. I'm gonna go, is this profiling? Cause I'm from the damn South. And then when I came back, it was funny because the guy, same thing. He was like, Tennessee, huh? I was like, son of a bitch. What is it with y'all?
They're looking for anything.
But he said, I told him, I was like, I've always heard Detroit is this rough city. I was like, it's really nice. I went to a Tigers game. It was great. I went and smoked in this great cigar shop that it was odd because I was like one of 2 white people in there. I was like, I fucking love this. I was like, I'm not used to this. And, he was like, oh, you just need to stay within the shadows of the buildings. And I was like, did you just Jason Bourne activate me? What the hell is that sentence? And he was like, don't get outside of downtown or you'll get rough. And I'll go, that's adorable, but thank you.
Yeah, there's parts, you know. Detroit's an interesting one. First of all, I've been messed with at that border many times. You know, I've been pulled out of cars. You know, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. We're gonna go. I've had a guy unsnap his gun. Like, you know, what are you gonna shoot me? Because I'm asking when our car's gonna be done searching. You didn't find anything. We told you there's nothing in there. But you know, these are just tactics. I mean, shit. Last summer, I went over there. I guess it was in the last 2 springs ago. Didn't go over at Windsor, went over at Sarnia because we were going over to Hamilton, which is
okay.
You know, and you know, which is another big city in Ontario. You know, a couple 100,000. So I went to some school there, some conference there, and did my ordeal. And going across, I had all my merch. You know, I've got a list of stuff, and we got the full search, man.
Wow.
Like, are you making money? And I just told her everything. I was, yeah. What did I do? So they need to fill some paperwork out. I'm talking to a conference tomorrow. Are we okay? Did I break the law? You know, guys sitting in there watching the hockey game. Imagine that up in Canada. And you know, I just started to get kind of like wheezy, like, come on, man. I don't want to take away from your hockey watching. Am I in trouble? Are you sending me back? Because if you got to send me back, I don't even get paid to go do this. I sell a little bit of merch. You know, like a band. Yeah. What do bands do? You know, I knew kind of what they do, but they're just looking for reasons. They're looking to mess with you. They're looking for anything. You know, that's their job. Yes, you know, and you know, then I say something horrible like, "Boy, you do a real good job." You know, you couldn't get on the Trump campaign, huh? Next thing down below that was just, you know, slumming it here after midnight, you know, watching for terrorists and graphic designers trying to sell posters for a couple $100.
I'm exchanging paper for another paper. Like what? Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? I got to tell you, every time I go over to Canada, I'm like more and more and more afraid. I've done it so many times, you know, like I know the rules. I have rules, you know, what you're supposed to do. And I mean, last year I went to Slovakia and I was, I had everything in a manifest. I had a, country of origin and all this stuff. Right? These customs people, because you know you have to pay duty and stuff. And I got a guy basically sleeping at the customs thing, and I kind of, excuse me, you know, and he was, what, you know, I said I need to claim all my stuff, and he just goes, what do you got? And I'm like, posters, decals, stickers, a couple books. He goes, just go. You know, I mean, it was and then
move along.
13 hours I'm on the plane. You know, 13 hours I'm on the plane freaking out. You know, for sweating, and then it's just like, see you later. You know, honestly, it's coming back into the States. It's probably the roughest. It's these guys that just,
they got a hard on.
They got to talking to someone. And I just kind of say, let me have it. I got to go catch my cab in 7 minutes. So, you know, what are the rules? And by the way, I want my shit stamped, you know, like I want my shit stamped. I've had guys tell me I'm not stamping it. I'm like, then get your supervisor.
Yeah.
A shit stamp. The stamp's right there. I'm not going to grab it. You're going to shoot me on the spot. Like, you know, these guys are just powerless, power hungry. I don't know.
One last, I'll end it with one last question. Is there anybody still on your list that you want to meet that you haven't met yet?
Oh, wow.
Have you met Ian from Fugazi?
No, and
I met Guy. I met him. We have one of the most, I love my city. I'm surprised I've not just kissed my city's ass this entire time. We have one of the most experimental festivals in the world called Big Ears. That it's all this weird stuff that comes here, and people, 80% of the people who come from Slovakia, Eastern Europe, all these places just to descend on Knoxville. And they screamed, was it Monument? And Jim Cohen and Guy Piccolo were here and did a Q&A after.
Did you talk to him?
I just went up and shook his hand and said, nice to meet you. Thanks. I say what I say to everybody. Thanks for coming to my town. Hope you enjoy your time. Thank you. Because I'm like, you don't want me bothering you.
Those guys, I have a hesitation.
Right.
They're deep. You know, they seem very preoccupied and have their own way. You know, some people are like, waka waka, let's party down. And like, I'm someone and you're something. And let's, have this interface. And I have never met Ian Mackay. I've seen Fugazi a number of times back in the day. But I'd be afraid to, because I just know I'd be such a bumbling idiot, to be like, oh, and then this and then that, because I've watched him tear apart people for saying the wrong thing. Listen, you're amongst sort of greatness, but you're kind of not. He's just very down to earth. And that's why makes me even love him even more. No, I've never met that guy, Iggy or whatever. I'd be afraid to. They're a little bit different. Now the other two guys, like the drummer, I would probably go up to him. He seems pretty, amicable and affable. But the bass player even seems a little more like that. But there's a seriousness to those guys.
Okay.
But to answer that question, I mean, holy smokes, I've been pretty lucky to get, there's when I really think about it, it's all rock and roll-y kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've never met Kozlek, and I think I would be afraid to meet him. I was afraid to meet Jeff Tweedy, but he was actually very nice.
Yeah.
But,
Maskus, you've met Maskus a bunch.
Of times he is uncomfortable as the day is long, but generally a very sweet, just he's kind of an odd guy. If you don't talk about guitars and you just say something dumb to him, and I have, like, oh, I really love the new album, thank you. He'll just kind of go, cool. He's just an odd kind of bird, But I've sat and talked with him. But you go down Wayne Coyne, I've sat with him for 2 hours, and did an interview with him, and it was just like, whoa. I mean, that guy is just crazy. I've met Mike Watt. But as you go through some of this stuff, it's like, the more I know about it, the less I kind of want to know sometimes. Yeah. I would really like to meet Jay Farrar from Sun, and all that, Uncle Tupelo. But I've heard that he's very down to earth. In fact, someone heard me lamenting about, the graphics and stuff. And then I got off the podcast and my buddy was like, by the way, I know Farrar. I sent him your email. And I just was like, oh, geez, now what?
Oh my God.
Something. I won't hear from the guy. But if I did, I would just tell him, I've been a fan a lot of years, Jay.
Yeah.
You guys can do better. And if it's just someone making the decisions for you, fine. But I will help you make better graphics.
Yeah.
I don't want any money. I'm just the asshole that buys the record every time it comes out, and you guys, Wilco does a really good job. Take a couple notes, from these guys. He might not care about that stuff, and that's a weird thing. But my favorite bands, they care about every element. So
you've got one of mine. I would love to eventually meet Willie Vlaughton. Like I actually
I'll go to lunch with him.
I don't think I ever told you. I actually discovered Richmond Fontaine like in 2002, 2003 from like some music blog. It was that song Polaroid. I was like, this is weird and different and amazing.
Those guys that listen, whether or not I know Willie, and I know him well enough, I love that band.
Yeah.
I love the music. I love the alone quality, the weird loner kind of quality. I mean, it's some dark stuff he's got. But when you drive around the Northwest, he's one of those sorts of poets that put this place into music. Yeah. For me, other than that, it was, I don't know, some indie stuff or Riot Girl stuff or some kind of punky punk rock stuff or, some kind of alternative, whatever bullshit, sub pop kind of stuff around here. Sure, the grunge explosion. But no, Willie talked about it. These downtrodden characters out of some sort of, some weird pulp novel or something, that are getting beat up and getting chewed up in the West. I watched this documentary last night about these, it was called Florida Man, and it just talks about this sort of, these rough characters living in Cocoa Beach, fighting and fucking and getting, drug deals and getting arrested and threatening to kill themselves. And, you got a couple hipsters just pointing a camera at these guys to get this crazy footage because it is something when you go down there. But that world, and the weird part is like, these are like 55-year-old guys. What about 25-year-old kid that's talking like that? You're like, what universe is he from? He's not looking at social media and being guided by all the bright language and, woke culture or non-woke or whatever. No, it's just kind of, land of the wild down there. And it really got me thinking, like, how often do I ever see any of that kind of stuff in the Northwest? We live in a nice neighborhood with nice Portland people, and there's protests every night with people that are concerned and et cetera. And there's ugly moments from that protest, but just a little bit. That's what goes on the news, But, other than that, there's 9,000 people walking pissed, and trying to make a difference. Well, we just don't see a lot of that element of, like, weird stuff. And those songs make me think, because, Willie would go on these, like, he would go down to, like, spend a week in Elko, Nevada, and just get one of these little, one-room little hotel things, where there's just these strip, little motel deals, and then hang out and just write about the experiences he saw people fighting and drinking and making friends with him. And he would do that for, like, kind of research and stuff on his way back and forth to Reno, where he's from. So when we talk, Willie is basically, whatever you want to call it, pretty enlightened guy and kind of a hipster in his own right. That's what we laugh about. Like, we don't live a hard life, but he knows some people that have.
Yeah.
He had some times that he has, where it's like, wow, man, like, I'm just grazing on that stuff, Man, I love those records. Everybody listening to all, 800,000 of you guys, go buy some Richmond Fontaine records, you guys. But
I'm gonna give you who my person is, and I'm gonna end on that because I want you to mentally picture it. My guy is Magic Johnson, and if I ever meet him, I'm just gonna walk up and say, "Hey, man, I'm gonna hug you, and I'm gonna cry, and it's just gonna happen. I'm sorry." And that's how it's going. He's 6'9", I'm 6'7". It would probably be pretty funny.
Heard he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is a very nice guy.
Some of these guys, that's so big. I don't know who, I'd like to meet Cornell West. I've always been interested in him.
I got to see him speak here at the university, and he was fucking fantastic.
I'd love to, shake the hands of Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know. I mean, I've met a handful of folks, and become buddies with some people, but you got to give people their space. I mean, I hear people say things like, "I wish I could meet Aaron Draplin." It's like, whoa, weird.
Aim higher, man. Aim high. Oh, sorry.
My God, are you kidding?
Wait. I'm sorry. We're still going. Sorry.
I really feel like you gotta dream a little bit, youngster. Because you can come to the show and climb all over me, and you've been to multiple things. You're hard to miss. But oh man,
I saw Chip Kidd fanboy out on you, man. That was a great moment.
I mean,
he also draped himself over me and talked about how his partner was going to be jealous that a big man.
Right. I mean, when was that? Where was that?
That was it. So I'm going to tell, sorry, I know you got to go. The first time I actually got to talk to you was I saw you at Weapons in Cleveland, and then you were at Howe in Boston. Yeah. And you were just standing off to the side, and nobody knew who the hell you were. And I walked up, I was like, "Hey man, I saw you speak at Weapons." And you just like perked up and you're like, "Hey man." And I was like, "Yeah, I saw you. It was great. You wove flung the flag." And you were like, "Hey man, can I hang out with you in there?" It's like, "Yeah, I don't give a shit. Come on, man. Let's go."
I would go to those things and be like, I don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
This time I went to that Boston one, I smuggled in 9 people who wanted to come see my show. And I was like, I can't, you're not allowed to go see the rest of the thing, but but we don't need to get into that.
So we went to lunch one day, and the 2 people who had went on that trip with me, we got sat in the back room of a restaurant next to Nick Swardson. And I was just like, I was freaking out a little bit. I was like, "That's fucking Nick Swardson." And my 2 friends were a little older, and they're like, "I don't know who that is." It's like, "He's in all the Adam Sandler. How the hell do you not know?" And he was sitting there, and he just kind of gave me a heads up, like almost like, "You're in my demo." Yeah, you're in my demo. You know who I am. All right. Yeah. Go enjoy your time with your mom, man. That's awesome. You're getting to go, man.
Going home. We got to go so I'm going to help her get her car ready, because we're doing some stuff like I got to go fit a cooler, because cooler, then we know because we're going to live out of that thing. And there's a little bit of apprehension, because it's like, if that cooler's not going to quite work the way we do it, I got to go get something. I got a couple of days, but we're going to go home. We're going to do a straight shot. And listen, man, thanks for having me.
Dude, I appreciate you doing this, man.
Catch up, and I hope to see you again soon somewhere.
Yeah.
And we'll take care. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a safe trip.
Bye-bye.
See you, man.